Today we are going to talk about the fourth stage in Fowler's faith formations, and it is the synthetic conventional stage. And this encompasses teenagers from the age of about 13 to 18. When kids get to this stage in life, they are able to think abstractly, so they can move from the concrete to the abstract. And so they are able to see the layers of meaning in the stories, rituals, and symbols of their faith. So as kids go through this stage, it's really important to stay connected to them, because when we get in the abstract stage, we can end up having a lot more questions about different items and different things. And also, depending on your child's personality, this is going to affect the questions and how they encompass that. So make sure that you stay connected to their faith formation, particularly during this time of their life. They are also able to see things from other people's perspective, which is great when living at home, when they can see the different, where you're coming from and where they're coming from. But also it can tend to be a stage where when they encompass other people's faith, that they are drawn into understanding their faith to a point that may be confusing about their own personal faith. So make sure that if they are surrounded by people that have a different faith system at school or other adults in their life, that you're keeping tabs on that. You're talking to them about that. You're keeping the communication lines open. You're going to hear me talk a lot about communication during this stage of their life, because it is essential that you keep the lines open. They are going to act like they don't want to talk to you during this stage. It's going to be a difficult time of transition when it comes to how much they want to tell you. They're trying to establish their own independence, their own ability to be an adult and to think for themselves. And so you may have to find creative ways to communicate, but make sure you keep trying and working at it. They also, at this stage, will start to claim faith as their own instead of just what the family does or what the family says. Now, this can be a difficult time for you as family, because they may push back on some of your traditions, rituals, with "why are we doing this?" and "I don't understand this," or "I don't like this." That is a normal stage. It's an uncomfortable stage for us as parents, but it is a normal stage. Allow them to process through this. Issues of religious authority are important for people at this stage. And it resides more with their friends and religious community at this stage instead of with their parents. So they are going to be looking for authority. They may come home and say, "I have to do this because so-and-so tells me to do it, and it's a different authority than you." Well, that's a normal thing during this stage. So don't get too worried about it or too anxious about it, but make sure you're keeping tabs on what's happening. A lot of times during this stage, kids are going to say they don't want to go to church anymore. This is probably the number one question I get asked. What do you do when your kids say they don't want to go to church anymore? It's common during this stage. Kids get their driver's license during this stage. They're getting a lot of independence, and so they're going to probably at some point say that they want to select something different. I'm going to give you a few pointers on that. One, look at kids as individuals at this stage. I have two children, and one of my children did not do this in this period of time. He never challenged us about going to church. He always wanted to go to church. He did not give us any difficulty about that. But he also is a child who had a lot of questions about faith and was very interested in answers. And sometimes I didn't have those answers. My husband didn't have those answers. So we had to get help and find other people who had those answers, because he really wanted to claim faith for himself. So that was a really neat stage in his life. And honestly, to tell you the truth, I grew as a Christian during that time, because as he had questions, I was looking for answers. And so as I found answers, it expanded my faith. So walk through this with your child and let them do this. My other child, on the other hand, she had a period of a time at church where she did not want to come to church. And she said, "I don't want to go to church there anymore. I want to go to a different church." Well, of course, my husband and I were very shaken up about this. We did not want our child to not attend church with us. So I'm going to give you some creative ideas. First of all, kids kind of go through where they think they don't want their parents hanging around them. And as painful as this is as a parent, we all go through it. They're going to disconnect from you. So let me say this, let them disconnect with you about some different things in life, but perhaps not their faith. And what I mean by that is let them have some more independence with their friends. Let them have some time away from you. Maybe don't hover quite as much so that they get that separation in other places in their life, and maybe they won't crave it as much in their church community. So for instance, I went to every one of my child's sporting events. I'm not suggesting that you don't be connected there, but I quit showing up at practice like I used to just to sit and watch. I started giving both of my children some separation during this stage to have their own community and their own life. That way, on Sundays when we went to church as a family, they didn't need that quite as much. Another thing that you might try to do is let your kids sit with somebody different in church than you. Keep an eye on them though, because at least if your children are anything like mine, they tend to want to talk during church. Make sure you have an eye on them, but let them have some social time in this period of life so that it seems a little bit more natural to them and not so abnormal from the rest of their life. Another thing that we tried with my daughter was we said to her, okay, you don't want to go to our church. Where would you like to go to church? Because we'll start visiting churches with you. Pretty quickly, she decided that wasn't such a great idea either. When we really got through her head that we were going to church, then the fight was over. You got to establish some strong boundaries about things that you will tolerate and things that you won't during this stage of life. But you do have to give them some ability to make choices. Let them choose the restaurant you're going to eat at. Let them choose what you might have for dinner. Let them choose some things like that. Because if you don't, they are going to have to need control of some things in their life. Don't have that be their church at this point, because you really, until the time they leave for college, you want to keep this intact with them. Remember, during this stage of life, some of their choices can have lifelong consequences. You want to keep a safety net around them, and by saying that, what I mean is they've got to have other people in their life, but you kind of want to help give them people in their life that are safe for them. Now, one thing I see in a lot of churches is we tend to want the youth pastor to be our child's best friend. That is not necessarily the best thing to do. We still need people in their life that are speaking truth, that are giving them guidance, but not in a friendship way. They still need authority figures in their life. And so their youth pastor can be somebody who can speak truth to them, but maybe not somebody that they hang out with all the time as a friend. My kids used to say to me during this stage of life, we have friends. We want a youth pastor, and we want our teachers in our Sunday school to be people who can give us wisdom and guidance, not be somebody that we just hang out with. So make sure that as you are leaders in your church, faith, community, that you are helping encourage these things so that your kids are getting that solid biblical teaching that they need. Let kids ask you questions about God. Don't God shame them. And what I mean by that is if they say to you, I don't believe in God. Okay. Well, instead of freaking out, which is a natural reaction, especially those of us who have a long established relationship with God, that may freak us out. Don't let it freak you out. Talk to them about, why don't you believe in God? C.S. Lewis is one of the greatest theologians and writers of Christian children's literature, and at one point in his life, he was an atheist, because he really had questions. He had to own his own faith. And so don't be too disturbed when your kids come up with some of these things. But keep doing the right things. Don't let them say, I'm an atheist and I'm not going to go to church with you anymore. That's not negotiable. You're an atheist? Well, one thing that I want you to do then, and I want you to prove to me God is not real. This gives your kids an opportunity to really have to invest in proving something to you in a way that I can promise you at the end of this journey, they will discover that God is in fact real and He is living, and they will see that in your lives. But don't just say that isn't true and move on. There could be other things that they need to express to you, that they want to talk through with you, and let this be an opportunity for that. Another thing that happens during this stage of life, kids start to date. Now, I'm going to probably be stricter about this, but I want to tell you I lived by it with my children, so it's a good rule. Get a good boundary of when you think it's okay for your children to date. For us, it was the age of 16, and that was just the rule we had in our house. I'm not suggesting that you have that same rule, but you need to have a rule, and you need to talk to your kids about it before it happens, and then you talk to them about it. But you can also bring your faith into this part of a child's life, but it is a huge part of your child's life. Who they date, when they date, why they want to date, all of those things are very important, but you want to be involved in it. So find ways that you can be involved in this process with your children and make it a really neat time for your kids, a special time for them. But remember, when we jump into this too early, it takes away some of the mystery of it for them that they need to have later as they grow up. So find conversations that help you as you establish this. And again, remember, if you have more than one child, they're going to be different and their needs are going to be different, and they're going to maybe want to start dating at different times. So make sure you explore that with your kids. Another thing I want to tell you is stay in the parent role. This is real important during this time. My kids had friends who they thought their parents were so cool because their parents were starting to try to be their friends. Don't do this too early. I can tell you that'll come later as your kids become adults. But if you give that to them too soon, you are going to mess up the balance that God has given us as parents. We are to stay in the parent role. We are to stay in the guidance role, the wisdom role. You want to be your children's authority, and you want to be the person that's speaking truth to them. You don't want to get that mixed up with friendship. Friendship will develop as you work through these stages. But don't try to be the cool parent at this time, because really that's not what your child wants. Your child wants to have a stable, loving, consistent parent who they can count on, who can be there for them. So even though it's real tempting, I know I always struggled with that. I wanted to be the cool parent. I wanted all my kids' friends to like me. But what I didn't realize is as I was there as my children's parent, and I was stable, and I was who my kids could turn to, that was a cool thing for them. And later in life, my kids have told me how much that was important to them, and they needed that. So I want to encourage you, even though it's tough, this is really where parenting is not for cowards or weak people. We really have to be strong. Your self-esteem is going to take some blows, because you're going to feel like when you get in the car with your kids and they don't want to talk to you, and you try everything to get them to talk to you and they shut down, you're going to feel like, what's wrong with me? And I had those experiences. If you talk with other parents, they've gone through those experiences. So try to remember that it is really important that you stay in that role. The last thing I want to say on this is don't compete with other parents. It's really hard. I know I fell into this trap, so I'm not telling you all of these things as somebody who did them perfectly. I'm telling you them as somebody who made mistakes along the way and has tried to learn from them. But one thing it's hard to do is to compete with other parents at this stage. That can be a really damaging thing, and our kids know when we're doing that. And so step back a little. When you get around other parents, step back from trying to one-up each other and embrace each other in a loving, caring way as parents of other kids too. So this is an opportunity for you to be a better parent by not competing with other parents on whose children are the prettiest, who are the fastest, who are the best, who are doing all of those things, because really that's just us trying to make ourselves look good. And believe me, I learned that the hard way myself. So try to be the person for even other parents that you can help them as they parent together. Keep working at this. It's hard, but it's a great journey, and I encourage you to love your kids, love yourself, and most importantly, love God during this period and let Him help you.